All right, so thank you everybody for coming to our November monthly Our Revolution meeting. Um, and our agenda for the day is going to go over ground rules, got some steering committee updates, treasurer's report, just regular committee updates, chapter updates on what we've been up to, upcoming events, and last, the main thing that probably people are here for, education committee segment, food as a human right presentation by our treasurer, Paul Baicich, followed or combined with a presentation by Sanjay Shrivastava from the Indian Cultural Association on the ICA's massive food distributions that they do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis a lot of times. Encourage people to go if you have not, but obviously related to the idea of food as a human right. And so thank you, Sanjay. Excited to hear from you later on. And thank you, Paul. So just basic ground rules. And, Francis and Kat, if you could please monitor the waiting room and let people in. So basic ground rules. If you're not talking, please stay on mute so that background noise doesn't get picked up. If you would like to say something, when we do the education committee segment part, there is going to be opportunity for comment and questions at the end. But even throughout the regular meeting, if you have something you want to say, just do the hand raise feature on Zoom. Happy to, have you chime in. And then this last one's not really relevant, or it is somewhat relevant for, the Q&A portion after the education committee segment. If you have a question you want to ask, comments are okay too, but if you have a question you want to ask, please try to keep it brief to like no more than a minute because we want to make sure everybody has a chance to say something. We will cut you off if we need to, but please don't put us in that position. And last, be respectful, of course. Real quick, have one, pretty exciting update, a sad update, but then also an exciting update. The sad update is that my co-chair, Kat Lee, has unfortunately stepped down as co-chair of Our Revolution Howard County. But that's not because she's going away necessarily. As people can see, I think she's on the call tonight. But she is moving on to bigger and better things. She's going to be running for the Wild Lake CA board, which is the closest thing we have to the city council in Columbia/Howard County. And so wishing Kat the best of luck in her race, and hopefully, this club can do what we can to support her and other great grassroots candidates that align with our values in those races come April. But so Kat is no longer the co-chair, but we've had a new co-chair step up to fill the position, and that is Mary Laturi. Mary, sorry, I realize I barely ever say your last name out loud, so maybe I didn't
Oh
get
no,
that.
that was right. That was great. I was just thinking that too. I'm like, huh, I wonder if he said that before.
Yes.
Um,
But yeah, if you
yeah,
want to introduce yourself.
yeah. Hello. My name is Mary. I moved to Maryland a couple of years ago. But I just kind of started getting involved with the Rent Stabilization Coalition, which I will touch on later. But just been working really closely with Jake and other members of the board who are here. And it just kind of made sense at the time for me to fill in for Kat so she can focus on her race. Um, I don't know what else to include about myself. I don't know. Oh, I work right now I do like communications for the chair of the DNC Environment and Climate Crisis Council. So like a lot of like digital organizing and that sort of thing. I'm gonna stop now.
And you've got Our Revolution ties with Our Revolution.
Yes, yeah, sorry. The woman I work for in Michigan, she's in Michigan, but she is the founder of our Rev Michigan. So I also do a lot of communications for that.
Nice. Well, welcome aboard, Mary. Super happy to have you. I hope that goes for everybody else as well. And for those of you who have not had a chance to meet Mary, talk to Mary, I definitely encourage you to reach out because she's here till April, whether people like it or not. But I know everybody will like it. And so welcome aboard, Mary. Excited to have you. So without any further ado, uh, we, as always, please, especially if you're new, scan this QR code. It should bring you to our link tree, which has links to basically everything, every relevant link that you could want related to this club. Signing up for our email list, getting access to all of our social media accounts, following us, being able to become a dues paying voting member, et cetera, et cetera. So please check that out if you have not already. And then want to go to a quick treasurer's report from Paul. If Paul is
Sure. It's adjusted. Let's see. Yes, it's right there in front of you. I needn't make any more comments and gobble up time. Total chapter funds, $1,619.35. And we got a lot of merch in terms of shirts, sweatshirts, T-shirts, Bernie books, miscellaneous books, etc. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. And contact Paul if you want to buy any of that stuff. We had an expense to reimburse me for some printing stuff for rent stabilization, $56.30, and then we got $20 in book sales. And so please again hit up Paul if you'd like to take advantage of any of those merch opportunities. So in case you are interested in getting more involved with Our Revolution, aside from just attending monthly meetings, ways that you can do that. We have several different committees that you can get involved with. Some are at different stages of evolution than others, but probably our most active one is the Education Issues Committee, which Paul is going to be giving a presentation at this meeting as a part of, but do various different topics, kind of all over the place, national, local issues, and it's just a way to inform people about that. They do standalone events or just presentations during the monthly meetings. We also have a county legislation committee with Joan Pontius, who's unfortunately not here tonight. We have focuses on obviously county legislative issues. We have a social event committee ran by Percy with Progressive Democrats of Howard County. Unfortunately, Percy's not with us tonight either, but we've been doing these for the last couple of months. We've got one in November we'll talk about. We've got the CA board watch committee led by Jim Hubbard, who I don't believe is here tonight either, but we've just started having meetings with that committee, and we're trying to start to testify at CA meetings. So people want to get involved with that. State Legislation Issues Committee, we haven't got that off the ground yet, but hopefully when the state legislative session starts, we can get that moving. We're doing, weekly door knocking basically with the rent stabilization efforts, but even after rent stabilization, we still want to be doing door knocking. So if you want to get involved with that, you can. Social Media Committee, and all these committees, by the way, there is a form that you can fill out to join it, to join any of them, and I'll put that in the chat as soon as okay, here we go. I'll put that in the chat. But we've got a social media committee, direct service committee if people want to get involved with stuff like what the ICA does, food distributions, electoral committee. And so all that to say, there's lots of different opportunities to get involved. So I would encourage people to do so. Paul, would you like to speak a little bit about the education committee, especially the event 5 days from now that's part of that?
Sure, I was going to do that when you got to the talk, but yes, we're having our very first standalone education committee, separate and apart from the chapter meeting, and it'll be on November 20th. That's a week from tonight, 7:30, and it's going to be on the topic of understanding fascism and neo-fascism today, and it's a joint presentation by Our Revolution Howard County and our friends at Indivisible Howard County, Maryland, specifically their Defend Democracy team. And we should make sure that everyone on our mailing list gets an invitation. And I just won't say any more except that it should be very interesting.
Yes, and thank you for taking lead on planning that, and that's good that our friends at Indivisible are helping, and I'm just going to put the Zoom registration link in the chat here if people want to register for that now. But yeah, it's looking forward to that. Very unfortunately becoming a more and more relevant topic by the day, and so would encourage people to check that out. And yeah, we would definitely will give it, you know, its own email blast, Paul. But
And there's one thing I'd like to add to that, if I may just take 30 seconds. If
yep.
you can't come to it, you will see at the middle of the screen there was a short 7-minute video done by Robert Reich in early August on understanding fascism. It's 7 minutes. It's brilliant. It's on his 5 core characteristics, going from rejecting democracy for strongmen and stoking rage against cultural elites and nationalism based on a superior race, and glorifying strength and warriors and disdain of women and LGBTQ plus people. It's a great short one, and we'll build on that with any luck. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. But I was trying to say thank you, Paul. And I'm trying to copy and paste that YouTube link in the chat as well. But yes, thank you for getting that going, and I'm looking forward to that event on Zoom. Okay, so moving on here, we've got what do we have next? We've got the legislative committee, the county legislative committee, which unfortunately, again, Joan Pontius is not available to give us an update on that. But that's one that's, you know, we're sort of getting it off the ground. We have had our first meeting, and, you know, hoping to have more, especially after rent stabilization stuff ends, because a lot of people involved with this committee, like myself, Sarah, Blair Chisholm, we're also involved with the rent stabilization stuff. So hopefully once that ends, we're able to put a little bit more energy into the county legislative committee. But if that's, you know, what people are interested in.
I want to talk to you about the F word. No, not that F word.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking about
Let me
fascism.
Sorry about that.
The term fascism is often used loosely, but you can generally identify fascists by their hate of the other and vengeful national.
But I see we've just been joined by Callie Young from Martin Mitchell's team. So thank you, Callie. We are just about to get to rent stabilization stuff in a second, and I know Martin's going to be you know, supportive with our upcoming tenant town hall. And so thank you for joining us tonight. But yeah, so
of course, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Callie. And so but you know, before we get to that, you know, another committee, social event committee, that is ran by Percy Lee, one of our board members, who just texted me that one of their kids just broke a bone, and so she's not available to be on tonight, unfortunately. Hopefully she can still be at our November social event meeting, which we've been doing, or not meeting, but meet up. But we've been doing these joint social events for the last few months with Progressive Democrats of Howard County. They're quite a bit of fun. Usually get like 8 to 10 or sometimes more people there, and you know, so it's a good place to network, a little bit less political than a lot of our stuff. Last one we did a Oktoberfest happy hour at Neo Pizza and Tap House. I know I was there, Mary, Francis, Kat, Carla, and some others there. It was a good time. And so our next tentative social event, although if weather doesn't permit it, maybe we have to cancel it. But for now, it's the plan. We want to do hiking at Patapsco Park on Saturday, November 25th at 2:30 p.m. And so I hope folks are able to join us. And again, hopefully it's not too cold, and if it snows or something, we'll cancel it. But crossing our fingers that the weather holds up for us there. So I hope folks will make it there. Again, we've got the CA Columbia Association Watch Committee with Jim Hubbard. We now had our first official meeting. I'm a part of this committee. Cap's a part of this committee, as you know, Wild Lake candidate. Joel Hurwitz is a part, and Jim, unfortunately, is not on tonight to give us an update. But basically, the CA is starting to talk about their annual budget process, and so he's been following that quite closely, and I know Kat has been too. And so since he's not here, we'll move on. But I see we are joined by Sarah Pan tonight, one of our steering committee members, high schooler here in Howard County. Thank you for being active, Sarah. And you have been active with some anti-Moms for Liberty efforts locally with a group of people doing that. Moms for Liberty, of course, is a far right, bigoted, mostly towards LGBTQ plus community, and unfortunately, there is a chapter in Howard County. And so, Sarah, I'm wondering, how those efforts have been going. If there's any updates there.
So we haven't had a meeting after the initial meeting. I'm not sure if it was because there was a small steering committee meeting afterwards that a lot of people weren't a part of, but in the chat there have been lots of discussion around Montgomery County banning this book called Jack of Hearts, allegedly for having some sort of sexual content, which and they've also been talking about this guy from Florida who testified about guns or something like that. I don't remember the gist, but there has also been discussion around I'm not sure. It's just they said there were some people complaining about Jack of Hearts being in one of these high schools, and then how ridiculous that is. But I know after this that they posted about there being 2 meetings afterwards, and one of them is at Glenwood Community Center December 16th at 1 p.m. and another one is at Mission Barbecue November 27th at 6:30 p.m. So if anyone is interested in crashing at their meetings, those are where they are.
You said at November 27th at Mission Barbecue.
I believe so. At least that's what it seemed like in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so those are Moms for Liberty events at those places.
Yep.
Okay.
Those are Moms for Liberty events.
Yeah.
There was a pretty large group at the previous Moms for Liberty event, like definitely outnumbered the attendees. Airy, Indivisible, several other groups were there.
Yeah, and to me, this kind of goes in line with this, rising fascism and neo-fascism. I think that they're choosing, LGBTQ plus people and especially trans people as their next sort of, or one of their next scapegoats and target groups. And so thanks, Francis, Kat, and Sarah for being on top of all of this. And yeah, Mission Barbecue, unfortunately, Mission Barbecue is a Maryland-based company started on I think the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and it's very conservative values. So definitely, I would encourage people to call Mission Barbecue, try to get the event canceled. But knowing that company's politics, I wouldn't be shocked if they go through with it. But you could still try. But thank you for those updates there, Sarah. Yeah, so we will move on. Upcoming events. Mary's going to talk about this in a little bit, but We've got, tenant town hall as part of our rent stabilization efforts this upcoming Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. at the Central Branch Public Library. I'll let Mary say more on that in a few minutes. We've got, again, the Understanding Fascism and Neo-Fascism Today event that Paul discussed earlier. That's next Monday, 1 week from now. We got the social committee event that we talked about, the hike at Patapsco. Our December social committee event, which will happen before our December general meeting. It's going to be a white elephant Christmas party. We'll have more dates and details when it comes up. And then our December meeting is going to be an education issues committee presentation by Marg Goodlin on revisiting FDR's second Bill of Rights. And so those are upcoming events, although there is another upcoming event. Just some real quick updates on county unionization efforts. The Ellicott City Starbucks workers who we've been supporting their unionization efforts for months now, they just reached out to Paul just in the last few days. They said that they are going on strike this upcoming Thursday, November 16th from 8 to 11 a.m. They're striking because it's Red Cup Day, maybe Starbucks' biggest annual promotion, and the Starbucks workers feel that they're consistently understaffed for these big promotional days. And so they're going on strike. And so they've invited us as our Revolution Howard County members to show up to the store during that time this Thursday from 8 to 11 a.m. But don't buy anything. Just show up in solidarity, but don't cross the picket line. Don't buy anything. It is a strike. And so want to put that on the radar. Really, we talked about this last week or last month, but the Howard County Public Library workers now unionizing with AFSCME. But really the last big update in terms of union activity in the county, and it relates to what we've touched on in the past, is the bus drivers in Howard County have been getting screwed really hard for a long time. Even before this debacle with this sketchy West Coast bus company, Zum, who's being way overpaid without any experience, and we cut all of our contracts with the existing local bus contractors. And so that whole debacle, which was a national embarrassment and national news because we gave this company without any experience this big contract, and they were completely unprepared, didn't have enough drivers, didn't have enough training, hundreds of kids not getting, buses sent to their homes, and it was just a big disaster. And so I don't know. Really, the bus drivers needed to be unionized for a long time, but maybe this whole thing was like the straw off the camel's back, the last straw on the camel's back. But all that is to say that West Coast, that controversial West Coast bus company, it's called Zum or Zoom, Z-U-M. Just in the last couple of days, it was announced that their bus drivers are now unionizing. An interesting connection. They are unionizing with CAT's union, with the union that CAT's McGeo union beat out the Teamsters. And so don't really care who they're unionized with as long as they're unionized. And so, Sarah's saying there's a Board of Ed hearing on Thursday around transportation involving, bus issues specifically. And so, that is sort of the last update from me. And then Mary's gonna give some updates on our rent stabilization coalition efforts, and then we're going to get into the education committee segment stuff. And so sorry you had to hear from me for so long there, but thank you all for being patient, and the screen is yours, Mary.
Okay. So anyone who is not familiar with what we've been doing, starting several months ago, Jake and some other members had started organizing for this issue around rent stabilization in the county after Prince George's County and Montgomery County recently passed bills to limit the amount that landlords can increase rent. And we'd been hearing from lots of tenants that was an issue here in Howard County. So after lots of public testimony and organizing, we got some traction. The county executive announced that he was going to introduce a bill on this issue, and he finally did about a month ago. So basically the issues that we were pushing for was like a strong rent stabilization bill versus just kind of a words on paper bill. which would include like a very limited cap for the amount that annual rent increases could go. No exemptions for new constructed buildings, no exemptions for any landlord or lease types or types of housing, vacancy control, which would basically apply that cap to, you know, each new tenant, basically just lots of things to cover up loopholes that would allow rent to increase too high anyway. And yeah, so the bill that was introduced about a month ago, definitely not strong as we want it to be. So we are working right now on trying to get amendments passed by council members to the bill that was introduced. So yeah, basically everything I just said, a lot of it is not in the bill. A lot of it is weaker, and there are additional loopholes that we're trying to close. So yeah, we've been knocking doors, and like Jake said, this coming Wednesday, so 2 days from now, we have a tenant town hall at the Central Branch Public Library, and that's at 6:30 p.m. I don't know if I said that. And basically, we will kind of go more in depth about what we've been doing, what this bill entails, and we're going to give a platform to tenants to talk about how the bill will affect them, like basically voice their support for making it a stronger bill, and also the opportunity to just talk about any issues they have around rent, basically like a platform for them to share the struggles of being a tenant in Howard County with increasing prices and all these kinds of things. So we're inviting press, and we're trying to basically mobilize them and get people to show out, one for, you know, the image of, you know, lots of people support this. It's an important thing that needs to happen. And then also 5 days later, there's a public testimony or a public hearing where we want to get tenants to testify, like we've been successful doing in 2 recent public hearings, and that has really made an impact. So we're trying to get a lot of people to show up, make strong testimonies on the 20th. And, you know, we're meeting with council members behind the scenes as well, trying to talk about the amendments that need to be made and get them to make them. So tomorrow actually is one of the meetings. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Anything else to add? Anyone else on rent stabilization coalition?
I think you hit it all. Thank you, Mary. But I see Mark said in the chat he got one of these texts from this. You know, there is this group called the National Apartment Association. I don't even know if they're a group that like existed more than a month ago, or if they were just created specifically for this, but they're sending mass text messages to people. We don't even know how they're getting people's phone numbers, but they're texting, you know, seemingly thousands of Howard County residents this fear-mongering stuff about rent stabilization. Mark just copied and pasted it in the chat. But, you know, Mary and I have been going out basically every weekend, you know, door knocking. We were just doing it yesterday, and we had a lot of tenants who said, yeah, we support what you're doing.
Is he frozen for everyone else?
He is
Yes.
Yep, he's frozen.
Yes,
Okay. I'm not sure if he's gonna hop back on. I'll just finish the sentence that he was saying.
It's okay, because I guess I'm co-host. If he gets off, it'll just go to me, I think.
Okay,
All right.
okay, that's good.
It'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, Mark, we have seen that from a lot of people who are like, one, how did you get my phone number? And two, yeah, I'd actually talked to one tenant who kind of was swayed by this at first, and then we're like, wait, no. Let me explain what's happening here. So yeah, they're reaching out heavy.
Sorry, I lagged out there for a second, but
You're good.
you were explaining the text messages.
Yeah, I just finished your thought a little bit.
Thank you. But yeah, so I think I put the tenant town hall link in the chat there, so I encourage people to RSVP or at least, attend on Wednesday night.
Yeah, even if you're not a renter, like I was saying, it'd be super helpful to just have a big showing to demonstrate the popularity of this issue.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you, Mary, for leading this rent stabilization effort, which bill hearing, one week from now as well, Monday, November 20th. One of the reasons why we're trying to do the tenant town hall to mobilize people to then testify with the grievances at the hearing. And I had another slide on here that I skipped by accident. What have we been up to? I won't do that since we're already going long and I want to get to the education committee segment stuff. But just know we've been up to a lot between the monthly meetings here. And I would share my screen, but I guess there's no need for me to share my screen because Paul has his own presentation for his food as a human right segment. And so maybe we can make him a co-host. Oh, there we go.
I guess it's working. All right, good. There we go. Maybe the right side of it will be chopped off here and there, but thank you very much. Presentation tonight is on food as a human right. It's really important for OR and for all Americans, I think, especially at a time when at least, let me get my face on here. You might want to see me. Hold on a second. Yeah. All right. Especially when at least 11% of American households are deemed to be food insecure. And when 300,000 Maryland families say their kids don't eat enough due to high grocery costs. It's time to take a closer look at addressing this key issue. All right, hold on. Next, all right, terrific. I'm going to touch on 4 points. General importance to us in and around our revolution, whether it's Howard County or not. I think it's far beyond us. Secondly, the realities in food insecurity, especially during the COVID. Third, the continuing situation as the COVID dread disappears. And 4, wrapping up food and a perspective on change, social change in particular. First, general importance to us in and around our revolution. We at our revolution learned through the previous Bernie Sanders campaigns that we supported that it's really smart to take on universal issues. Healthcare as a universal right, higher education, secure housing. We just touched on that a minute ago. It's no accident. A safe environment. It covers everybody. These are issues that should be viewed as deliverable for all. Let me just say in terms of the environment, for an example, a secure environment for all should and could be delivered through a Green New Deal promoted by Bernie, AOC, and lots of others. This is a way to approach the importance of food. This takes on a universal examination at the local level, and that's what's most important. Food security is such an issue. In the United States, 1 in 17, and even with my poor math, that's about 14% of Americans struggle with hunger. Before the pandemic, the overall food insecurity rate had actually reached the lowest point since it began to be measured in the 1990s. But those improvements were upended, totally disturbed, out the window by the pandemic. Then it was time for a new reality check. We live on the edge. Any crisis, any serious downturn in the economy can have devastating consequences. The pandemic was a challenge for us when it came, yes, to healthcare, that was the pandemic, and food insecurity. Those were 2 top issues. The realities now, especially during COVID, I'll admit my concern about food as a human right was somewhat remote and academic to me. Sure, it was in my head, as I'm sure it was in lots of your heads, but it was another thing to watch it, however, actually unfold before our eyes in front of us all as the pandemic grew. By last year, 2022, more than, 44 million people in the United States were facing hunger, including 1 of 5 children. That's 20% in my math. 13 million. Millions of folks in the US didn't have enough food to eat or didn't have access to healthy food. The next number, 49. In 2022 alone, 49 million people turned to food assistance for extra help. Food banks, food pantries, community organizations united to help millions of people access affordable, nutritious food for themselves and their families. Also, people experienced food security in every community. 100% of U.S. counties have food insecurity. Yes, even in Howard County, one of the wealthiest counties in the United States of America. However, by the way, rural communities in the South in particular are often more likely to lack access to enough food for a number of reasons. This is because of many factors like poverty, regional unemployment, the cost of living, etc. Inequality also is a root cause of food insecurity for people of color. Food insecurity happened to people of all races and all ethnicities. It is a universal problem. However, it is more common for people of color because of the long history of discrimination in the United States. Almost 60 years ago, in December of 1964, Martin Luther King, as he was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, said that I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies. That underlies a problem and a situation and a goal for all of us. During COVID, the demand exploded. Insecurity exploded. During the COVID situation, 1 in every 3 Marylanders was facing food insecurity. This is a image that we used when we were helping Sanjay and others with his food distribution situation. Remember those stories in the news at the start of the COVID era of cars lining up at food banks, families hoping that supplies would still be available when they reached to the front of the line. It was no surprise that even before the pandemic, 4 of 10 Americans didn't even have $400 in the bank to cover emergencies. And this was before the pandemic, to take care of essentials. Americans were sliding into debt in 4 areas. Mortgage and rent, we just touched on that, folks. Utilities, car payments, and food in particular. The struggle was for Americans to juggle all those bills as they were flying at them. In fact, in June of 2020, the world issue became clear. The United Nations warned that the world was facing the worst food crisis in half a century due to the recession caused by the pandemic. It got bad enough that SNAP, Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program, the old food stamps, had to be expanded. It became the SNAP Emergency Allotments, the EAs. These emergency allotments were temporary strategy authorized by Congress to help low-income individuals and families. I'll put that in quotes, air quotes here. It impacted many more folks than low-income individuals to deal with the hardships of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act authorized emergency allotments to SNAP to help address temporary food needs during the pandemic. It was huge. Starting in March 2020, SNAP households received emergency allotments in an amount equal to the maximum benefits for household size minus their monthly base benefits. What does this mean in terms of dollars? The SNAP authorization, the SNAP enrollment in March of 2020 was 37 million people. That's pretty bad. By September of 2020, it was 43 million people. SNAP was providing at the same time 9 times the number of meals that the entire food bank network was covering. So, why are we concerned about this in a crisis? Just in a crisis or just in an emergency? An alternative option, as I'm proposing here, might be to provide guaranteed food security for all U.S. residents and taxpayers, as well as a means to deliver it to ensure food itself as a human right. Such an approach may seem far-fetched to some folks, but consider the fact that food is a necessity of life. You can't live without food. You can't live without oxygen. Thoughtful advocates will regularly make the case that healthcare and education are also human rights. Absolutely correct. And these are the universal things that I said that the Bernie campaign was so successful in identifying. But why not food? And while there are by no means universal, we do have transitional institutions to provide those two services, healthcare and higher education, in the US that have been in place long before COVID-19 pandemic. In lieu of a full single-payer health insurance program, and you can ask Mark Dudzik about this, we have the transitional model of Medicare, or Medicare for all. That's been in Medicare as it exists, has been around for Americans 65 and older since 1966. For free college tuition, we have the state-run and even city-run colleges across the country, going back to the original example of the City College of New York and the City University of New York system created in 1847. This is a system that my wife Yvonne and Mark and I at the City College of New York took advantage of. It was virtually free. And this exists in most of the states of the United States, ready to transition into tuition-free institutions, given enough funding and the right set of political and economic circumstances. It's no accident that this was an issue that was a universal issue that was raised by Bernie in his campaigns. I'm raising this because I think food should be thought of in the same way. As for the predecessor of delivering food as a universal human right, we have food stamps, or what's been called since 2008, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Early versions go actually back to the New Deal, including efforts by Secretary of Agriculture Henry Wallace and the program's first administrator, Milo Perkins, between 1939 and 1943. And during the Second World War, there was food rationing. Now, food rationing is not food for all. Food rationing has to do with scarcity. I'm not talking about scarcity. It was necessary during WW2. But we are talking about dealing with an abundance of food and distributing it equitably, at least at minimum, to all Americans. By the way, rationing during World War II in the United Kingdom went beyond the end of the war, beyond 1945, all the way up to 1954. In any case, that's a side issue. FDR's second Bill of Rights that he suggested in 1944 included item 2 there, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation. And as we said, we're going to have a whole discussion about these 8-10 points of FDR's second Bill of Rights at another meeting. But he talked about to earn enough to provide adequate. I'm talking about, and we're talking about, now that we've had the experience of SNAP and food stamps, of transitioning that. There were additional pilot programs that evolved into the SNAP program. The current means-tested SNAP program could be seen as transitional. The logical next step could be to make it universal and national. Whoops, what happened there? Okay, where were we? Excuse me, folks. I was down, whoops, below that one. I was 1 or 2 below that one, excuse me. I touched the screen and there it went. There we go. The current means-tested SNAP program could be seen as transitional. with the current role of the states significantly reduced, if not eliminated. Frankly, we don't need to continue means testing and work requirements when it comes to a human right for food. The right wing assaults these programs like SNAP as handouts to the poor. In COVID times, the expansion of SNAP proved that it wasn't simply the poor who were taking advantage of this and benefiting. Far more Americans. On the other hand, universal programs are more popular, particularly in a crisis in the economy, and they're understood as fundamentally good for society. It should be an easy case to make when it comes to food, especially now. Under such an expanded SNAP program, adult individuals could be provided, say, $300 a month plus $225 per dependent. And this figure is more than the average amount currently received by SNAP, and no large amount of money, but certainly would provide a beginning floor. Yes, we'd have to raise some taxes, just like increases in Social Security and Medicare would have to increase taxes in certain sectors. And we might have to focus on boosting American produced and American grown produce, and with an American bias to win over the rest of the country. No, it wouldn't necessarily cover tomatoes from Mexico or grapes from Chile or beef from Argentina or olive oil from Italy or caviar from France, Germany, Japan, or Russia. But you can still buy it cash. Anyhow, let's go to the next point. The continuing situation has not stopped. It's gone past the COVID crisis. At the start of this year, 40 million people in the U.S. were still having difficulty affording household expenses, and a little more than 25 million people said that sometimes or often they don't have enough to eat, according to this U.S. Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey data as of February of this year. That's partially because SNAP opportunities had shrunk. Congress early in the pandemic, had provided that temporary increases in benefits for recipients of SNAP would end, and it ended in March of this year. When that happened, the average SNAP recipient got about $90 less in SNAP benefits a month, according to the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities. In the process, the state of Maryland lost about $69 million of federal funds per month. Remember, to make things worse, also at the same time, COVID-19 unemployment benefits expanded COVID unemployment benefits ended in the fall of 2021. And the Republican Party always wants to put SNAP on work requirements, especially for adults, curiously in their 50s for some reason. Food insecurity continues. I mean, it was amazing. There was a story on CNN on the 4th of July of this year that 1 in 6 members of the armed services, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, is food insecure. That's 16 to 17% of our armed services. It's a scandal. Surely a move to guaranteed food security to everyone, SNAP for all, should be constructed rather than overwhelming the existing food banks and food distribution systems we have here that I'm showing from the Indian Cultural Association. Rather than overwhelming them, wouldn't it be wiser to guarantee everyone an absolute minimum food diet? Clearly, feeding everyone at these minimum amounts should not be seen as a luxury. It's a rock bottom minimum and a way to finally establish food as an essential right. It would be a boost to all. Think, if you will, and there's some of us on this call, it would be a de facto increase to everybody on Social Security. There you go. Food as a perspective of change. Whoops, I don't know what happened there again. All right. Finally. There we go. Food and a perspective on change. Item number 4. The right to food should be seen as a fundamental human right. It's even recognized in the 1948, 75 years ago, Universal Declaration on Human Rights as an essential component of the right to an adequate standard of living. You can read that, and it's very important. Also read the lower left corner. It's non-binding. It's intentional for 3/4 of a century. But it's also included in the 1966 UN International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, as defined in their general comments. Quote, the right to adequate food is realized when every man, woman, and child, alone and in community with others, has physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or means for its procurement. Food banks, food distribution, SNAP have a very important role. And here's another picture of the Howard County situation, distributing food with the Indian Cultural Association. Just look at that line of cars. I mean, it just went out of sight. This was a few months ago. Sanjay may remember that particular day and experience. These situations play a very important role. They're experimental, they are transitional, they are learning institutions and experiences, they are community experiences. Incrementalism has its place. When a crisis like this hits, like the pandemic and food, circumstances arise, then what's generally available just doesn't do the job. When people learn with each other and among themselves the limitations of the current options, and they go out and reach, they self-organize, or they organize under multiple umbrellas. There are times and circumstances in our history when significant leaps are possible and demanded on social change. Some historical ones for our history have been under Reconstruction in the late 1860s and the 1870s. The New Deal, as I've mentioned before, and the blending of the Great Society in the 1960s Civil Rights Movement. What we have here is a problem and an issue for us to recognize and push when these issues arrive, when these leaps and changes and questions arrive, when there are possibilities for change, and to be able to recognize them when they occur, and to go beyond incrementalism. Bernie Sanders seized on that potential when he advocated, as I said, Medicare for all, a Green New Deal, free higher education for all. Serious Democratic radicals, at least, should be able to recognize and connect the dots. Step them down to the local level and build social and political efforts to leverage real change. Food is a human right as one such element. So I think we should approach it that way and with that orientation in mind. It's a general importance to us in our revolution. We should understand, secondly, the realities, especially during COVID. We should continue to be aware and attuned to the situation. And we should regard food, as, among other things, as a perspective on change. And that's all I'm about to say. Thank you very much, folks.
Well, thank you, Paul. It was a very great, informative, and thorough presentation. I like that you touched on a lot of the Indian Cultural Association efforts. I think it's a good transition to
that.
Yes, exactly that. But thank you. If Sanjay, if you want to, Sanjay Srivastava from the Indian Cultural Association, if you would like to, present about your group and its work. I don't know.
How can I follow up on that? What a wonderful presentation. I think the goal is increasing awareness for more people to understand the extent of the problem, and simply getting involved in terms of, Paul had mentioned, I don't have a formal presentation prepared. Time didn't permit it. However, Paul mentioned reality check. Alice data, paired by the United Way, puts the numbers, and they don't contradict what Paul has said, but they show that 9% of the people are below the poverty line On top of that, you have 30% who are ALICE or asset limited income constrained, meaning essentially working multiple jobs and still unable to make ends meet. On top of that, you have 18% who are on the cusp of ALICE. This is how big the problem is. Recently, at the University of Maryland, down the street, not down, I mean, College Park, they surveyed 5,000 students, and they found that more than 20% were struggling to put food on the table, meaning they didn't have enough to eat. And 26% now, I think the latest figures are in, of students in Howard County, there's one of the richest counties in the United States, are enrolled in the farm program. It's free and reduced meals program. So that is, I think that's all I will add to this issue of data and how large the problem is. And we can't be academic about it, meaning in the sense that we all see this problem, we read about it, we see on the TV and so on and so forth. And I think as all of you have done, we are moved to action. When, sometimes when our government fails to do things, we ourselves have to step up. And it's with the help of people like Paul and Yvonne and Carla and Jake and others who have helped in our distributions, who have really made it possible. And I think we have made some small impact. On the screen, you see some very long lines. We've distributed in the cold, in the heat. I remember one summer day, heat stroke. I wasn't able to get up after the food distribution, or with numb toes and fingers during the wintertime. But the fact of the matter is, when our government, and I'm going to speak only about the county government at this time, isn't doing what it should be doing, we were compelled to step in. And this wasn't anything more than recognizing a problem and then seeing what we as individuals and as a group could do about it. And that's how simple it is. That it's the understanding that we each of us can make a difference. And we owe it to one another to and each of you are trying to bring change in society, at the national level, at the local level. And that's what I see is done or tried to do. And it's also been our goal to share what the Indian culture has been about, or what it is about. And so with the spirit that we're all one family, we continue to help those that are struggling in Howard County. A lot of things are seen, like in the big distributions, the lines seem to be getting longer. We've seen, because of inflation, cost of goods are rising, packaging is getting smaller, everything is getting more expensive. So people are struggling. Many people are putting food purchases on credit cards. And I think the problem is that 40% of our people are truly affected by this. And sometimes getting enough to eat, ramen noodles isn't a good meal. And so it's a question of nutritious food also. This has impact on children's ability to the childhood diseases, diabetes, hypertension, a lot of things that we hadn't seen 20, 30 years ago. ICA is also developing a farm, and that's coming along. We've built a greenhouse. We are refurbishing some buildings. And gosh, I wish we had the county support. It tends to be very political. But anyway, we will keep chugging along. I don't think I can add anything more to what Paul has said, except for get involved, stay involved, and get the message out. Let people know how big the problem is and what they can do to help out. Right now, we're distributing loose produce and canned foods, and that's tough. It's tough to manage. I mean, when you've got between 12 and 20,000 pounds of food on the ground, you want to make sure everybody gets some. All the families have enough for at least a week or two. And that's the struggle to make, just to make sure that the food lasts throughout the whole line. And so, yeah, our big distributions are at the Miller Library, and then we have supplementals at different places. That's, I think, all I have to contribute today.
If I could add a couple of comments, if I might, five points. Sometimes this kind of need, this kinds of insecurity appears, item one, invisible, below the radar. This is what shocked me. It is two, almost secret food insecurity. Look at these vehicles. If you passed any of these vehicles on the road, you wouldn't know that these people and these families and their kids are food insecure. I'm a car aficionado. I like cars. I follow them. I could count 2 or 3 Lexuses at these events. And it wasn't that these people were getting something that they didn't deserve. These are folks and families and small businesses who thought they were doing fine a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they've crashed. They are in desperation. They show up and it's humbling for them, except that we make it easy. Sanjay, Needy,
No,
make it easier for them.
No, Paul, it is in fact we, and it is we, because without you, without Yvonne, without all the people who have stepped in to help, this would not have been possible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me just make 3 more quick comments. I've had 5, and the number 3 is what you just mentioned. To some people in the establishment in this rich county, they like to tout how wonderful Howard County is, and it is wonderful. Sometimes something like this is an embarrassment to them, I believe. Somehow that everybody isn't doing that well somehow is a reflection on them, and it's something I think that we need to be aware of. I won't go any further. Item 4 is, I think, correct me, Sanjay, you're having another one of these things this weekend.
Yes, on Saturday.
Saturday from 9:30 to noonish.
9:30 to noonish, yeah.
And it's at the back of the Miller Branch Library.
In front of the library, yes, in the back of the library, yeah.
Right. At the parking lot.
Yeah, I would second that, the simple idea that there is an element of shame that goes along with the individuals, the people who are collecting, and we try to make it extremely easy. Everybody is welcome. I've gotten to know a lot of these people, and I greet them in my traditional way, and I treat them as friends. That's right, namaste. I bow to the divine in you, is what it means.
And added to that, I might say, I think it's meaningful that we're having this evening discussion, correct me if I'm wrong, on the Feast of Lights, Diwali.
Yes.
So there you go. That was my 5th item of note. And I don't think we have anything more to say unless you do, Sanjay.
No, I would say get involved, stay involved, and there is an element of shame, both at the government level. I think it's true that people don't want to acknowledge because they see their own failures, and they see our group, and we've actually distributed more food than the Howard County Food Bank, and they see, and how's that possible? Because we really haven't had a budget. We have, but we haven't. And also at the recipient level, aid level. So whereas people go to the food bank, they have to present ID and income, qualify for the aid. We don't ask any questions. People wait an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours in our food lines. And so that has to be respected and it has to be appreciated. So serve with gratitude. It is our privilege to be able to do something. And so we stand in the face of anything that comes with people who need help. And, thank you all for helping. Thank you all for spreading the word and for taking the time to listen.
Over to you, Jake.
Hey, yeah, Yvonne?
Yeah, I just, first of all, I want to thank Sanjay, and because it's been a privilege to work with him. And Paul and I, every time we leave that place, we feel good about ourselves. I know that's not the primary reason why we're there, but it's just a wonderful thing that you have provided. I wanted to add that as far as childhood hunger goes, during COVID, when kids' parents were able to pick up food from the schools, they were able to pick up twice a day. The government was providing it. They were able to pick up breakfast and pick up lunch as well. Childhood hunger went almost down to zero in the United States. And the food was provided for anybody who came. You didn't have to prove anything. And when COVID was over and that program was cut, when kids went back to school, it went right back up again. And that, I don't know if that doesn't prove that it can be done, that it can be wiped out. Very quickly, it can be wiped out. I don't see why the government can't provide that kind of food at schools throughout the year. Anybody who wants to come, who needs to come pick up breakfast, and anybody who needs to come pick up lunch, right through the schools. That's for kids. It's not for the adults. But it went down to almost zero, and now it's back up again. That's it.
Yvonne, it's been my privilege and a great pleasure.
Okay. Jake had asked me to close out the meeting because a tenant had called him. I don't know where the PowerPoint is, so I'm gonna hope that this was the last thing. I do think it was the last thing. Does anyone else have thoughts about this presentation? Thank you so much, Paul and Sanjay, for sharing all of this. I don't see anything. Okay, yeah, I think that was it for the night. Thank you so much for everyone who was able to come tonight. And I will also, I think we're also going to send all the events. There are lots of great events that are coming up that we talked about tonight, opportunities to talk or volunteer with ICA and many other things that we're working on. So thank you so much again. And oh, Kat says, yes, town hall this Wednesday, November 15th, 6:30, Central Branch Library. Next ICA food distribution is that, yes, Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to noon at the Miller Branch Library. So we'll send that out so that everyone has that information. But yeah, thanks so much for being here, you guys, and talk to you soon. We'll keep working together for better things.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.